Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of my Sunderland 11. As always, we are in association with the Sunderland Food Bank. Incredible work around the city of Sunderland, so please go and check them out. Links in the description below. And the Sunderland Fans Museum, please go and check them out as well. They are incredible, have a fantastic museum. So yeah, go check them out. A very special guest today. We have Sunderland Echo writer Phil Smith. Phil, how are you?
Yeah, I'm not bad. Thanks very much for having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no worries. Very glad to have you. How are you, really? How's your how's your lockdown going? I imagine you're still working though.
Yeah, I think I'm really, really lucky, to be honest. Not just that, I get to go to games, which I know is something that so many people are missing so much. Obviously, incredibly privileged to be able to still do that, but also actually just to be able to keep working is something that I know I'm really fortunate as well. So yeah, I'm in a very fortunate position compared to a lot of people, which is obviously something I'm really grateful for and never take for granted, really, because I'm a very, very, very lucky kid. So yeah, I hope everyone out there is doing okay, really, because I know how tough it is for so many people.
Yeah, I'm sure your job's keeping you very busy now with all the nothing's ever boring at Sunderland, is there? But this time there's some really interesting developments going on, so I'm sure you're never bored.
No, I think you can count on one hand the number of quiet days I've had since I started the job. So I started doing this job about 4 years ago now. So just as Sunderland was starting to tumble out of the Premier League, and to be fair, there's not been many positive stories in that time, as I'm sure we'll get to as we go through my team. But it is never ever quiet, and I'm just hopeful that at the moment, this is the start of something much better. I think everyone's just hopeful that this takeover, is a fresh start and a proper reset, because we should have had that when Sunderland came into League One. That should have been the start of a rebuild and doing things properly and taking the opportunity to put something long term in place. And it is a shame that, well, it's more than a shame, really. It's so poor that we haven't had that. But hopefully under Kyle Louis Dreyfus, we're starting that now, and I just have everything crossed that there's better times around the corner for all of us, because you always say it can't get worse, but it always seems to. So fingers crossed, yeah. This is the start of the upward curve, and everything crossed, really.
Let's hope so. Also, you touched on it back there as well. You are going to the games, which is something that a lot of all of us Sunderland fans wish we were doing as well. So how's it really? I'm sure it's been a very different experience. How's it actually been inside the stadium? Like, what's it like?
Yeah, I mean, it is obviously really surreal. It makes you feel like you're at pre-season games or a training game in terms of the atmosphere. I don't think it's impacted the actual football as much as I thought it would, in terms of, I think the tempo and the intensity, I don't think has suffered too much. I think there are moments where you notice it, and the example I've used a couple of times is, I don't know if you remember when Sunderland beat Shrewsbury at the Stadium of Light a couple of weeks ago. Sunderland started the game really well, went 1-0 up, and there was a moment where Jack Diamond went through on goal, shut the keeper down, and he was that close from getting in there and scoring a second. And I remember thinking then that if the fans were in here, the whole place the roof would be about to come off, because the tempo was good, the pressing was really good. And I actually noticed, that was one of the moments where I noticed how quiet it was. And that was one of the first times that I really felt the lack of fans was having an impact on the game, because I thought the players would be so pumped up if they had the fans here to give them a response. So you do notice it in times in games, but I think generally the football hasn't been affected too much. It's just the whole atmosphere, really. As I said at the start, I am so lucky to still be able to go to games. It is such an immense privilege. But, it is totally different, and there are bits I miss as well. One of my things that I love doing on home games is I get my work done, you do the press conference and all that kind of thing, and then afterwards I'll go to the pub and I'll meet some friends who are all Sunderland fans, and we'll chat about the game, and they'll tell me my player ratings were terrible and all that kind of stuff. And that's something that I really, really miss. So like everybody else, my kind of match routine has been disrupted. But, I am very fortunate. And I do think that probably at the start of the season, I thought it was going to have a huge impact on the games themselves. Sometimes it does. But I think by and large, the football's kind of, unfortunately, I guess, is of a similar standard.
Do you think having no fans in the stadium takes a kind of pressure off the players' backs? Because although you say it doesn't really impact that much, but do you still think that maybe the crowd was a big pressure, and that's them not being there makes it a bit easier for the players?
I honestly think it makes it harder for the Sunderland players. I do. I know that it's always a big debate, and listen, there's no doubt that there are pressures that come for playing for a club the size of Sunderland. I think that's that's an obvious statement. But what I alluded to there, I do think, especially at home, I think they miss the fans, because I think that in moments in games when Sunderland get on top, I think for the opposition, and we've seen it so many times, I know it can be hard to remember when Sunderland were a really good team at home because it was quite a long time ago, but we've all watched games where you can feel the crowd get up and they get on top of the opposition, and the opposition feel like there's no way out. And that's when you start seeing them making mistakes, concede sloppy goals. And there have been a few times, I use that specific example against Shrewsbury, where I just felt that if the fans were in, the players would get a real lift. And sometimes you can feel them kind of slip away a little bit. And I do think if the fans were there, Sunderland would be stronger. And the away games, it's everywhere you go in whatever division, Sunderland take a huge support. But sometimes in League One, Sunderland can fill out a third of the ground with their away supporters. And it just gives the players, I genuinely think it gives them a lift. I don't doubt that there's pressures playing for Sunderland, but I have never been one who believes that, taking the fans away would make it easier for Sunderland players or take pressure off. Maybe one or two individuals it does. But I think by and large, I do think Sunderland would be far better off with fans in the stadium, especially at home. No, it's not always easy. And yes, you have to perform, and rightly so, because Sunderland's a big club and there are big standards. But I honestly think Sunderland would be a few points better off if fans were in. I really do believe that.
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to ask out of interest, what would you be your opinion on it, is how long do you think these football can go on for without having fans in the stadium? Because they won't survive forever.
No, I think that's that's an absolutely a fair point, and I think it's tricky really, because I think this season it feels like there's almost an acceptance that we'll play at the end of the season without fans, and I think that's probably a fairly good pragmatic decision, because clubs need to be prepared financially for what that means. So what I mean by that is I think it would be really dangerous if clubs were, for example, planning to have fans back in a month's time, because I think that's unlikely. So for me, I think the sensible pragmatic decision is to say that at least work to the idea that we're not going to have fans back this season. And then if you do get some back, that's great. That's an unexpected bonus. And then you have to look towards next season. I don't think next season could start without fans. I think starting the second season without any fans in the stadium would be a bridge too far. But I think, to be honest, Matthew, I think one of the things we've learned really in all areas of life, not just football, from this pandemic, is that you can't look too far ahead. You have to plan and prepare as best you can, but it just feels like we don't know what the situation is going to be from one week to the next. So, we're all kind of, my hope, and I hope it's a realistic hope, is that we can get through this season, which is, it's second best for everybody, not having fans there. But then we can start to look towards next season as having fans back properly, at least in large capacities and stadiums. And if we manage to achieve that, I think football probably will be okay. If we get into a position where we're looking at towards next season with no fans, it's very hard to see how clubs can survive financially and how football can survive, just because the product, as we all know, is inferior. It's not the same sitting watching it at home on a stream. So I just cross everything that we can start next season with fans, because I think for the actual product itself and for financial reasons, I think that'll give the game a chance of getting through.
Yeah, and as you say, it's just like a football match going on there, where everything that's about football is taken out of it. The routine, the socialising, the going to the pub before and after. It's the whole match day routine. It's not just the game on the pitch. So that's just something that a lot of people have lost, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially with Sunderland, let's be brutally honest, if it was just for the 90 minutes, a lot of people wouldn't bother, or wouldn't have bothered for a few years, because why would you? And so much of it is about that routine of seeing your friends, seeing your family, sharing in something with other people, that kind of social aspect of it. That's, for a lot of people, a lot of the time, that's 90% of the experience. It's the away day, it's getting on the train, having your cans on the train and whatever. So I think that, while I don't think that the actual product on the pitch is that much different, the whole occasion is, it is so much inferior. And of course it can't go on forever. And I think we can probably get through this season if we feel like things will be back to normal next year, because then I think we'll have something to look forward to. But you're absolutely right. It's not the same, and we just got to hope that before too long it'll be back to some element of normality.
Yep, 100%. So we'll stay on football. We'll take it back for you. What are your sort of memories of growing up and watching football?
Well, my first game was Kevin Ball's testimonial against Sampdoria. I don't know the year off the top of my head, but I reckon it must have been around 98, 99. So I'm sure some watcher will know off the top of their head.
Yeah.
But I remember that being a fantastic occasion for Kevin Ball's testimonial and a terrible, terrible 0-0 draw. If I remember rightly, actually, Kevin Ball took a penalty and the Sampdoria goalkeeper saved it and started celebrating wildly, which I don't think he quite got the script that it was Kevin Ball's testimonial. But yeah, so that was my first game. And then my first seasons kind of watching Sunderland regularly was the Peter Reid era. So my first season, Sunderland finished 7th in the Premier League. And then they finished 7th in my second season watching them. And I kind of assumed that Sunderland were one of the best teams in the world and it would always be like that, which of course, was very, very misleading. But yeah, I was very fortunate because my first experiences of watching football and watching Sunderland was Quinn Phillips beating Chelsea, being 4-0 up at half time. Fantastic, high intensity football. And obviously I was totally hooked. Obviously it wouldn't always be that way, but they're my kind of strongest early memories is that sort of Quinn and Phillips, Kevin Ball era.
Yeah, excellent. What would you say your sort of put it, in terms like you started watching Sunderland then to now? What would you say your best memory is from that time?
I think my favourite season would probably be the Roy Keane season when Sunderland won promotion, and actually the season after that, in the first season in the Premier League when they scored a lot of late goals, and it still felt like a really exciting time, even though they weren't sort of flying in the table or anything. Because I think when I alluded to there, the Peter Reid era, I think, to be honest, I took that for granted a little bit because I didn't know anything different. So Sunderland being really good and winning loads of games was just the normal. And then obviously to go through the sort of Howard Wilkinson era, which was a really, really difficult time for the club. The Mick McCarthy era, to be fair, I think Mick McCarthy, given the challenges he faced, did a very solid job, but I don't think anyone would say it was an exciting time. So I think the Roy Keane period, he brought so much energy, and alongside Niall Quinn as chairman, obviously, he just made Sunderland feel like such an exciting club that was really going places again. And I think to get that back after what I'd first seen in the Peter Reid era, that was just an amazing time where you couldn't wait for match days to come round, before the game kicking off and hearing the Hey Jude and everyone singing the Keno song. That felt like we were getting back somewhere. So that would probably be the time I would point to, I think, is probably the most special for me, when I was probably most excited about kind of the club and where it was going.
Yeah, fair enough. I think we've had that with a few managers. We could say, when we had Sam Allardyce, and we all thought at the end of the season, this is it. Now we can push on and not be a relegation fighting team anymore. And just sort of how that scenario changed. But yeah, it's similar for me, to be honest. When you say you started supporting Sunderland, the first few seasons were really good. When I first started supporting Sunderland, it was sort of the 9, 10, 10, 11, where we were like top half Premier League. Fight. For sort of majority of the season, I thought this is fantastic. And then we've stayed in the Premier League for 10 years, but then we are where we are now. So it's quite unusual for us to see Sunderland sort of this slow down. But I think it is all about. It's not just about what happens on the football pitch. It's supporting the football club and the sort of community it brings.
Oh yeah, listen, that is 100% what it's all about. The results are important and they make us feel great on a Saturday afternoon when they're good, and they make us feel terrible, when they're bad, and obviously that's part of it. But my sort of attachment to Sunderland is it's not really about the players on the pitch at any one time, or the manager or the owner or whoever that is. Yeah, sometimes you go through phases where you have a strong attachment to the team because of how they're performing or whatever, or you have a strong attachment to a particular manager, but it's not about that. It's about my friends who share this stupid, irrational love for the football club and everything that comes with that, and the time you spend with them as a result of that. The same with my family. So yeah, and sometimes, obviously everyone wants Sunderland to be pushing in the top half of the Premier League, but sometimes when you go through the difficult times, that's when kind of the bond gets stronger, isn't it? And that allows you maybe to appreciate when things get better, to appreciate them that little bit more. So hopefully, I really passionately hope that in 2-3 years' time, you and I and everyone else will be looking back in this period saying, that was so tough, but thank God, we're in a better position now and we can appreciate that a little bit more. So it's a huge responsibility for the new owner if he comes in, and hopefully he can make us feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question I have, just out of interest, is how did you sort of go from watching football and just being an everyday fan to actually being like someone who writes about it and watches the match to actually like write articles about it? How did you do that?
Yeah, so I mean, I always wanted to be a sports journalist. So my first love, really, as well as football, was cricket. I still am a really keen cricketer. But my first kind of articles were in a Love Supreme fanzine. That was where I started. I used to sell them on match days, and I used to write every now and then for them. And then I went to university. I actually studied history, but I kind of always knew that afterwards I wanted to get into journalism. So I edited the student newspaper in Edinburgh. And then when I came out of university, I did a conversion course to get my journalism qualifications. And then I went and got a job in Cardiff, which was a huge move for me, covering Cardiff and Swansea. Spent a bit of time then working specifically on Cardiff City when Neil Warnock first came in, which was a really exciting time. Great time for me that I learned an awful lot from. And that was when the opportunity to come back up to Sunderland presented itself. And even though, I kind of sensed that the club was going to be entering a difficult period, obviously I didn't think it would get quite this bad, because I don't think anybody did. But even so, it was just an opportunity I couldn't turn down, not just because professionally it was obviously an amazing opportunity, but because personally, I love this region, the Northeast, so much. It's such a huge part of who I am. And I knew that I'd always regretted if I didn't take the chance when I was there to come and cover sport and cover Sunderland and cover football in the region. So yeah, I'm hugely fortunate that I've had the opportunity that I have, even if obviously I would have liked it to have coincided with a much better time for the club, and that has been challenging. But I've never lost sight of how lucky I am to do the job that I do.
Fantastic. Great to hear. Just one last question before we go through your starting 11. Now, I ask all the guests this, and if you could just put into your own words, what does Sunderland AFC mean to you?
Yeah, what a great question. It's friends and family. I think is something that I get to share with so many of the people who I care about most in my life. It brings us something to laugh about, brings us something to get angry about. Occasionally, it brings us something to smile about, and I think that's a really unique and special thing. And also, I love the fact that it draws me into this community of people who otherwise I would have nothing in common with and would maybe never meet or speak to. Being part of the Sunderland community is sometimes it can be frustrating, and sometimes we're all so frustrated, but ultimately it brings me a lot of joy, a lot of laughter. And so, it's just, I guess it's that being part of that community and having something that brings, friends and family closer. I think that's what supporting the football team is all about.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect answer. Don't need to add anything to that. So I think we'll go through your starting 11 now. It's a 4-4-2 formation you've gone with, is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. As I'm sure everyone who's done this, I agonised over a few selections, but I thought I'd go with a good old-fashioned 4-4-2 in the best spirit of Peter Reid.
Excellent. There's a few interesting choices already on there, I can see. But do you want to start us off with who you have in goal?
Yeah, this was first name on the team sheet and the easiest selection by far. My first footballing hero. It's actually been, the goalkeeper's quite a strange one, because in my lifetime we've either had really brilliant goalkeepers or not so brilliant goalkeepers, to put it diplomatically. But there was a few I could have chosen. I thought Mark Poom, real cult hero, someone who I loved watching. Thomas Meyer, another example of a really underrated goalkeeper. But it had to be Thomas Sorensen, my first hero. He was, more than any player, really the one who kind of made me fall in love with the game. Obviously, I was so young then, it's hard to pick out specific memories of watching him, but he was just such an excellent, consistent goalkeeper. Saving a penalty in a derby instantly makes you a total hero, obviously. But I just was so fond of watching him, and he always had great kits, which might sound like a really kind of strange thing to say, but I always used to love the kits. So I always used to want to get the kits for Christmas, and that was, that's one of my strongest memories, is what kit would Thomas Sorensen be wearing this year. Fantastic goalkeeper and so many positive memories. In fact, someone who I love so much that I actually managed to make, my partner for my birthday made me a special Thomas Sorensen bookmark out of an old programme cover. So That goes to show you that my love for Thomas Sorensen will never die. So he was the easiest selection of the lot.
That's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, what a keeper! So that's your goalkeeper done. You'll start with your back four. We'll start with the fullbacks. Go to right back first. Who have you gone with there?
Yeah, I've got a definite weakness down the right side of my defence that I think any opponent would be sort of licking their lips at. But I loved Santiago Virginie. I know everyone kind of goes back to the volley own goal at Southampton, which is still the
Yeah.
strangest thing I've ever seen a Sunderland player do. Everything about that is just amazing. One of the things I always makes me laugh when I watch that video back is the reaction of John O'Shea and Lee Catmull. You can just see them in the corner of the shot, just completely confused, just cannot work out what's just happened. But I actually thought I didn't think he was a bad defender at all, by and large. And I think when you follow Sunderland, obviously this was before I started covering the club professionally, so I was still just kind of a fan. And I think when you support a club that's not always doing great, you've got to learn to love footballers who are slightly flawed sometimes. And I loved Virginie, and I can still in my mind's eye, I can still picture that little flick over Eden Hazard's head that he did at the Stadium of Light, which was just one of the best things I've ever seen on a Stadium of Light pitch. So yeah, to be honest, there hasn't been loads of great right backs in my time following Sunderland. I think Phil Bardsley was a solid player, but I thought he actually played his best football for Sunderland at left back. Chris Macon, when I first started going to games, was a really solid player. But yeah, I had to get Santiago in. He might lose me a goal over the course of a season, but he'll bring me some joy with some daft flick or something like that along the way, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, it's glad we can now laugh about that the own goal that he scored, because we thought at that time that's how bad it can get, but we've realised now that it can get a whole lot worse than that. But I remember,
listen, he gets straight in Sunderland's team now. He was not a bad footballer.
Yeah.
He did some daft things, but he was not a bad footballer.
I know. I was speaking to Rory Fallow about it from the Wise Men Say podcast, and he's talking about he put Virginie in his team, and we're just saying, like, what was Virginie actually trying to do though? Like, I know, like with his right foot and just hit it across the pitch. I'm not even sure what he was actually trying to do.
I mean, the only thing I could ever think of was that he was trying to sort of with the outside of his foot volley it down away from the box into the channel for one of the strikers to kind of chase down. And he's just got the execution badly wrong. But I think the fact of the matter is we will never know. And sometimes, you know what? Sometimes it's better not to know, isn't it? Sometimes it's best just to say we will never know how or why that happened, but it did happen. So yeah, no, I listen. He's in here. He's in my team because of the daft stuff he did. But I also want to say as well, he wasn't a bad footballer. And yeah, along the way, he would do one or two things that would make us all smile, and that makes him, in absence of many other options, that makes him more than worthy of a place in my team.
Yeah, fair enough. So we'll go now to your left back. So who have you got at left back?
This is a properly good footballer. Marcus Alonso wasn't at the club for a huge amount of time, but what a class performer. Associated with so many of my kind of mind's eye the best performances that the club produced in my time following them, really, at a time when, you know, Gus Poyet's style and system was working. And I have my strongest memory of Marcus Alonso, bizarrely might seem, was actually when he was playing for Chelsea. So I don't know if you remember, but the last day the Sunderland were in the Premier League, they were already relegated, but they went and played Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. And that was the day when Chelsea were crowned champions under Antonio Conte. And the press box at Stamford Bridge is right next to the pitch, so you get an unbelievable view of the action. And I've seen quite a lot of football, some at a very poor standard, some at a really high standard. Conte's Chelsea were the most organised team I have ever seen. I'm not saying they were the best team I've ever seen, but they were the most organised. They were absolutely outstanding, how well drilled they were, how much they understood their roles. And I remember thinking at the time, what an absolute pleasure it is to watch Marcus Alonso, because the way the pitch was and where the press box was, he was playing right in front of me. And I just got such an appreciation for how intelligent a player he was, always making the right decisions, technically how good he was with his left foot. What a fantastic footballer. And such a crying shame that someone didn't sign him that summer after he was on loan, because we all knew that he was a really serious elite left back. And fair play to him. I'm really pleased for him that he's gone on to prove that and had the career he has, because he was a total joy to watch, absolute total joy to watch. And when you asked me to do this, he was one of the names that I immediately knew being my team. What a fantastic footballer. So the first central defender, I'll go with my left-sided centre-back first, is Johnny Evans. Quite similar to Marcus Alonso, really, in terms of he was a lone player who came in. Obviously different to Marcus Alonso, he was a very young player, not a lot of first-team experience, but it was just clear from the first time he played for Sunderland that he was just a different class. What a magnificent footballer, so composed. You would never have thought he was such a young player with so little experience. He just, he lifted the quality of that team instantly. And then, of course, he came back the next year and did exactly the same thing in the Premier League, which was just spoke so well to what a good player he was. And I was so surprised it didn't work out for him at Man United, because I always thought he would just go back there and just build on what he'd done at Sunderland, and he would be Man United's sort of one of their key central defenders for the next 10 years. But fair play to him, because that must have been such a bitter disappointment for it not to work out for him at Man United. But look at him now, one of the best players in a Leicester team who are doing so well in the Premier League and had an amazing international career as well. Yeah, someone who I remember so fondly just because of the way he carried himself on the pitch, the quality he brought. One of the best loan signings the club's ever made.
Yeah, absolutely. Two loan spells as well. He had at the
Yeah,
club, and yeah, I mean he's still going strong now, isn't he? Fighting for sort of a top four for Leicester, so he's still going strong now. So that's fair enough. So his central defensive partner. This is an interesting choice, I've got to say.
yeah. Well, it won't be surprising to anyone who knows me, but it might be surprising to people who don't know me. So the first thing to say is that I really wanted to get Stan Varga in my team. I don't know if you remember Stan Varga, but one of my earliest Sunderland memories was Stan Varga's debut against Arsenal. The guy was unbelievable. He had the best game I've ever seen. And I went on and on and on at my dad that I wanted Varga on the back of my Sunderland shirt. And I remember him saying, "Are you sure you don't want to watch him a little bit more? Are you sure you don't want to see how he goes?" But I was insistent. Anyway, it turns out that he was never that good again, bless him. And I had his name on the back of my shirt for the entirety of the season. But I had to go for Aleem Ozturk. And I'll explain why. Aleem was someone I knew about because I went to university in Edinburgh, and I had a friend who was a big Hearts fan, and obviously he'd scored an unbelievable goal in the derby there. A bit of a cult hero. So I was quite excited when Sunderland signed him, and he had a terrible start to his Sunderland career. He played a pre-season friendly at Darlington. It was obvious he wasn't fit, really struggled. And to be honest, it looked like for a while like he might never get back in. Like he was just going to be one of those strange signings who never really played. But he fought back, and he proved to be a decent footballer. And the thing about Aleem was, obviously, I interview footballers a lot, and a lot of the time, they want to be somewhere else, and you can totally understand that. They've just played a really intense game. They want to get home, see their family. The last thing they want to do is be talking to a journalist from the Sunderland Echo. But I just remember having always fantastic conversations with Aleem. And when he finally came back into the team, and it was a good period of 6 months after the start of the season, just speaking so honestly about the struggles he'd been through in terms of when he was out the team, how disappointed he was with the performances he'd put in when he first came to the club. And I was just struck by what a humble, hard-working, honest character he was. And I just developed a real affinity for him. And because of that, I always rooted for him when he came into the team. And the thing I loved about Aleem was he was never the best player. But at about 4 different times when he was at Sunderland, it looked like he was never going to play again. He was out of favour. The manager was favouring somebody else. But he always worked hard, always found his way back into the team. And when he did, he never let anyone down. So yeah, for sure, he wasn't the best Sunderland centre-half there's ever been or ever will be. But I developed such an affinity for him as a bloke because of the kind of spirit he showed to keep coming back. And I wanted to get somebody in from my period covering the club, not just as a fan. And Aleem, I couldn't leave him out because, like I say, he became a real cult hero for me. And on a serious note, I think there's a lot to learn there about getting players who, care about the club and want to work hard every day, whether they're in the team or not. That's the kind of characters you need. So yeah, for sure, not the best player, but someone who I have a real affinity for. And I'll always look out for Aleem and see how he does in his career, because what a fantastic guy.
Yeah, he is a fantastic guy. I remember I was just asked to have a picture with him once after the game, and usually, footballers they just sort of pose, have a picture, and then they're off. He literally stopped, put his hand out to shake my hand, and he was just asking, "You right, what's your name?" And he's just so interested, such a nice person. And yeah, you're right. I remember he had he made that awful mistake at Sheffield Wednesday at home in the it was in the Carabao Cup game.
That's right, yeah.
And I don't think I know he played a few league games, but then it was just like he never played again, and he never played until Doncaster at home, did he? Where we won 2-0,
right.
and he played with Jimmy Dunn, and then he never found his way out the team. He pretty much played every single game after that, and he was solid.
Yeah, exactly that. And then when Phil Parkinson came in, he wasn't Phil Parkinson's first choice. But then Phil Parkinson, basically, it was a FA Cup game at Gillingham. Parkinson had barely any fit defenders. Aleem was injured, shouldn't have been playing. Put his hand up and said, "You know what? I'll come and do a job for you," and he did. And like I say, I'm not sitting here saying Aleem was a brilliant centre half, and because everybody knows that's not the case. But yeah, like I say, he's one of the nicest people I've met in the game since I started, working as a football journalist. And so I'll always be fond of him, and it would have been wrong not to put him in my team. And like I say, I'll always look out for him, see how he's getting on.
Yeah, and the way he sort of defends is quite funny as well. How he just wrestles the strikers,
Yeah,
and how he handballs the ball on the halfway line.
yeah. Well, look, it was back to basics, wasn't it, with Aleem? No doubt about that. It's kind of amazing that I don't think he ever gave away a penalty the whole time he was at Sunderland. So maybe he was a genius all along. Maybe he
Yeah,
knew exactly what to do to wrestle without giving away a penalty. Who knows? But yeah, a
exactly.
lot of time for Big Aleem.
I just wish he had a Sunderland goal. That's all I wish. But
I
it was a
know. Well, do you know what? It's like, I don't know if you remember that, because everyone, that Lyndon Gooch goal away at MK Dons, because that was kind of like our last big moment with fans in the ground. Everyone's remembers that day so fondly. Well, in the first half, Aleem missed basically an open goal at the
yeah.
back post, and I remember thinking, this is the day. This is going to be the day we get an Aleem goal. But sadly not. Should have kept him for the season. I was
Yeah.
so desperate to see him score. Never mind.
So, but in that same game as well, not only did he miss that chance, but I remember it was just very shortly after Lyndon Gooch scored that incredible goal. And then Chris Maguire put in a cross, and Carl Lafferty fired it back across, and it came over to Ozturk, and he was just on the edge of the 6-yard box, and he had to head it in the goal, like stand up and head it, and he just did a dive and head it, and it flew over the goal.
Yeah.
And I was right behind the goal, and I just jumped, and he broke my ankle when I did that, because I thought he was going to score.
I would have been on the pitch. I would have been on the pitch if he'd scored. It was great as well, because he always used to hover around when someone would get a free kick, because he fancied himself. And again, how good would that been if he'd taken one? But it never quite came to pass. But I'll remember him fondly, nevertheless.
Yeah, he's a fantastic guy. I mean, I never thought I'd say it, but Alan Mostock, great choice in your team.
I'm glad I've won you round.
Yeah, so that's your back four done. We'll go now to your midfield four. We'll start off with your left winger.
Yeah. So when I initially was thinking about this, I kind of wanted to get Don Hutchison in my team. So Don was in that team that I first started going to see, and he wasn't necessarily a left winger or left midfielder by trade, but he quite often did that job for Sunderland, where he sort of tuck inside. And I thought he was a fantastic player, really underrated footballer. I don't mean in Sunderland, I mean just generally. He was such a good footballer and had such a good career. But in the end, I just had to go with Stefan Sessegnon. Sessegnon, he was kind of one of those who never really fulfilled his potential at Sunderland. But you just remember the times when he was at his best. What an exciting footballer to watch. The kind of footballer that gets you out of bed. You want to go at the game to see, because you think he might do something special. Fantastic close control, had that ability to beat players. And so I couldn't, even though I don't think he achieved what you could have done as a Sunderland player, I thought, no, if I'm picking a Sunderland team, I'd always want him in it. And I did kind of think as well, what a partnership he would have had with Marcus Alonso. Imagine that, Sessegnon, just that threat from inside the pitch, Marcus Alonso on the overlap, that would have been something to see. So, yeah, I think Sessegnon could have had a better career, to be honest, and probably should have done. But what a treat it was to watch him while he was here. And so I couldn't leave him out, because he was just one of the most exciting players that I can remember.
Yeah, definitely. And if Sessegnon stayed for that extra season, if we didn't sell him, then we would have seen that partnership with Alonso and Sessegnon, really. And it's such a shame. But Sessegnon was a fantastic player. I just remember games watching him. I've spoken about it many times before. QPR away, where him and Bentner linked up really well. He played fantastic that game. The goal against Swansea, where he danced through the whole defence and then put it in the top corner. Goal against Newcastle. Goal against Everton. Just everything. That man was just magic.
Yeah, I think, and what you kind of saying there is kind of exactly my point as well. That for sure there were a lot of times when Sessegnon didn't play at the level he could, but there aren't too many players where you can recall 6 or 7 goals off the top of your head, and you can picture exactly who he went by, what part of the pitch he was in. It just takes a special kind of footballer to kind of bring that out. Where you have all these memories, individual memories within games. There's only a select few who have the kind of raw ability to be able to do that. And we haven't had too many, I think it's fair to say, at Sunderland over the last 15, 20 years. But he was one of them. And you can't put a price on that. You can't put a price on that. That's what the game's all about.
Definitely, yeah. Sessegnon, fantastic choice in your team there. We'll switch over now to your right winger. So you're debating who to put here with 2 people, but you've gone with one.
Yeah, I have cheated a bit here, but I'll explain my logic. So I picked Steve Mulbronk. That won't come as any surprise to anyone who watched Steve at Sunderland. He was a fantastic footballer. And I think Steve's someone I think about a lot because, you quite often hear people say that, at Sunderland, it's all about working hard, being a committed footballer. And that's definitely true. You've got to have that at Sunderland. You've got to play with lots of heart, lots of commitment, lots of energy. But Sunderland fans love good footballers as well. And sometimes I feel like that doesn't get much attention. Sunderland fans love flair players. Sunderland fans love players who can go past people. And the thing about Steve was he had all of that. He was just as comfortable putting in a horrible 2-footed challenge, lunging off his feet, as he was doing a wonderful turn and going past a player. And that made him a really unique, wonderful footballer to watch. Such a talented player. But as everybody knows, he only ever played 60 minutes. So I've cheated a little bit. And I just want to say as well that when he gets tired after 60 minutes, I'm bringing Bolo Zenden on because I loved Zenden. What a great attitude he had. Really lifted standards. Great footballer, even though he was coming towards the end of his career. That volley against Tottenham, one of my favourite ever Sunderland goals that I've seen. So yeah, I picked still encompassed everything that a good Sunderland footballer should be for me. All action. Not always in terms of his pace or what have you, but didn't mind getting stuck in. Great player. Yeah. And then when he tires a bit, I'm bringing Bolo Zenden on.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Yeah, Zenden as well was a fantastic player. I think the thing is with him is I don't know if you've listened to this podcast with him. I listened to him speak, and he said the only reason why he actually left Sunderland was because he didn't feel the expectations were high enough, and he felt that the team that he was in and that he was playing in could achieve a lot, a lot more than they were achieving, and he just thought in the end, this isn't really for me. If the expectations are sort of this level, it was very much just like, let's just survive in the Premier League. But he wanted to go, no, come on, let's go push on, let's go get Europe. That's what he wanted to do, and it's a shame to hear that because we all loved him, and it's just that's another one we let slip through the net really.
Yeah, I mean, Bolo had another year, 2 years in him, didn't he? There's no doubt about that. He could have contributed a lot for a lot longer period for Sunderland, and it is such a shame that he left when he did. But it tells you everything about the man that he just retired because he couldn't find the right place where he would play regularly and that would meet his standards. I mean, how many footballers play for 3-4 years longer than they should? That tells you everything about the man, that he looked to see what the opportunities were and just said, no, there's nothing that I quite fancy, so I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to go through the motions. I'm not going to play for the sake of earning money or what have you. It's got to be right. And it is such a shame that it wasn't right at Sunderland, but in a way that makes me respect him even more. That he took that stance of, if something's not right, I'm not going to do it. So it's no surprise to me now that he's now having a really good coaching career at a really high level, because he clearly had so much to give. And there's a part of me, that hopes that maybe one day in the future Zenden could come back to Sunderland in some capacity, because he's clearly got an awful lot to offer the game. So yeah, he doesn't quite make my starting 11, but I loved him. And like I say, when Steed needs a little breather, we'll get Bolo on.
Yeah, fair enough. That's fair enough. That's a great choice down the right. We'll go now to your central midfielders. So do you want to talk us through who you've gone with there?
Yeah. So my first choice was probably one of my easier choices, actually, was Stefan Schwarz. Again, just, you go, I suppose you could equate it to somebody like in more recent times, someone like a Shaqiri at Stoke or something like that. You just, where a player who should really be in the top 4 or the top 6 somehow finds themselves playing for a side kind of in the middle of the division. Schwarz was just such a quality footballer. I was probably too young to fully appreciate just how good he was, because like I say, this is when I first started going to games, so I'll only have been 9 or 10 or something like that. But he was just a class above. The way he carried himself on the pitch, his passing range, just a terrific player. And he kind of summed up the fact that we had a team there that was really, Sunderland in that era could give anybody a game. Didn't always win, but they could give anybody a game because they had that quality and they had that ability. One of mine and my dad's favourite players, Stefan Schwarz. Such great memories of going to watch him play, because you turned up to the Stadium of Light believing that someone would win. Didn't matter who the opponent was, you would turn up thinking they had a good chance of winning the game. And Stefan Schwarz was such a big part of that the whole time he was at the club.
Yeah, definitely. I think he was one of the players that sort of struggled with injuries a little bit as well, didn't he? At his time at Sunderland, and that affects quite a lot of players, I think. But yeah, Schwartz is a fantastic choice. You know, I don't think I was never lucky enough to see him play for Sunderland myself, but you know, you hear fantastic stories, and but yeah, great choice in your team there. So we'll go to his midfield partner now. So who have you
Yeah,
gone with there?
again, I suppose this is kind of like Schwartz, but in a more extreme example in terms of he had a lot of injury problems, and whereas Schwartz played in the brilliant Sunderland team, Claudio Reyna, this time he was here was actually not a great time for the club. They had one season where they just stayed up, just avoided relegation, then one season where they were relegated. So it might seem a strange choice, actually, Claudio Reyna, because his contribution wasn't huge. But again, I was still at that age where every Sunderland team, you have one or two players that you kind of worship a little bit. And Rayner was a quality player. Make no mistake about that. When he was fit and when he did play, he was a different class. So this one, there's not really any kind of rational explanation for it. He was just a player that I really liked. And I would love to see a midfield partnership with Stefan Schwartz and Claudio Reyna, because that would have class. They might get overrun a little bit at times, but dear me, they would be good to watch on the ball. And I actually got another prop for you. For Christmas, I managed to acquire a match-worn Claudio Reyna shirt.
Oh wow!
So one day in the future, when I'm doing a different job and it's a different world and we can all go to games, I'm looking forward to sticking that on and going to watch a Sunderland win somewhere in the country. But yeah, I have to say that he definitely wasn't one of the most sort of consistent or impactful Sunderland midfielders I've seen, but that's football, isn't it? Sometimes you just have players that you like, and Claudio is definitely one of them. So I'm putting him together for the long-lost partnership with him and Stefan Schwartz. That would mean something to see.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. It's all about who your favourite players are on the team, so that's fantastic to hear. So yeah, that's your midfield done now. So we'll move on to the strike force. You're going to rely on to score pretty much all the goals, or most of them at least. So do you want to talk us through each one of those?
Yeah, well, the first one, I couldn't not pick Niall Quinn. Kind of two ages of Niall Quinn, really. One was the footballer, such an underrated striker, because he was great in the air and he was the target man and all that. But some of the goals he scored for Sunderland, some of the things he did in games, the way he could control the ball with his chest, his quality with his feet, really great striker. And then obviously just what he embodied as a man as well. When he came back to the club as chairman, which, as we've talked about before with Roy Keane, was such an exciting time. And I think that Niall Quinn kind of embodies that. Sunderland is a club that has values and it's unique, and it is special. And it's not about being from Sunderland at all. Niall Quinn he played for Arsenal, Manchester City, and a very, very proud Irishman. But he embodied all the things we like about Sunderland. The quality, but also the graft, the personality, the humour. I just think in my lifetime, which is getting older, and I'm starting to get grey hairs, so it's starting to get longer, but it's still not the longest. But even so, I think he's the most significant Sunderland AFC figure of my lifetime, both as a player and off the pitch as well, and just someone who I'll always have the utmost respect for. And it wouldn't have been right to put a Sunderland team out without Niall Quinn. What a fantastic figure and fantastic person for the club as well. I remember his testimonial game, one of my favourite football memories, where he played against Sunderland played against an Ireland side and Quinn played for both teams. The atmosphere that night was just fantastic. It was such a special occasion. And I'm sure people know as well that the money he raised, he donated towards hospitals in Sunderland and in Ireland as well. And I think that just tells you everything about him. Just what a fantastic character. So yeah, I think he embodies everything that's great about Sunderland. I really do, both as a footballer and as a man. So had to pick him.
Yeah, well, I think the way he sort of grew up and where his upbringing was, I think there's a lot of similarities to him and Sunderland. I go to Ireland every single year, and I see a lot of similarities. How there's a sense of community, and that you always help out each other. And that's the same sort of the same thing I get when I'm in Sunderland, and I can see. I mean, it might not be the reason, but it could be partly the reason. And just where he's from, and when he came to Sunderland, he probably saw quite a lot of similarities there, and that's probably why he did fit in so well. And yeah, as you say, it's just the most unselfish person ever. You know how he helped all those Sunderland fans get back from Cardiff Airport when they
Yeah,
weren't
exactly.
allowed on the aeroplane, and just everything about him. A quality player, but you can be a quality player and not a very nice person. But he was a quality player, and quality off the pitch as well. So you have to give him credit for that. Incredible.
Definitely amazing, man.
Yes. So we'll move now to his striking partner that you've gone with up front. So do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, this was the toughest decision, definitely. I mean, it felt wrong not picking Kevin Phillips because obvious reasons. I actually, as well, there was a big part of me wanting to pick Marcus Stewart because Marcus Stewart was kind of my second phase as a Sunderland fan. And I really liked Marcus Stewart, great hard working player, great finisher, and I think it made a contribution that's probably being more appreciated over time. But in the end, I guess it's similar to the Aleem thing. Obviously, I've been covering Sunderland for 4 years, and it's been mostly kind of negative. There's been a lot of kind of really tough times. It's not been what anyone would have wanted, what I would have wanted. But one of the most exciting periods in that time, arguably the only exciting time really, was when Josh Madger was just scoring every week, and he was scoring all kinds of different goals. It was exhilarating to watch. He wasn't the all round package. I think we had a lot of discussion at the time as journalists and supporters and what have you, about the parts of his game that weren't quite ready. But it was exhilarating to watch, and I wanted to pick him because I wanted to kind of end on. It really saddens and actually annoys me that Josh Madger's time at Sunderland ended with negativity, because at a really well run football club, and where things at the boardroom level and the top of the club were right, he would have left the club for a huge profit, gone on somewhere else, and we would have said what a fantastic thing that is. And it wasn't Josh Madger's fault that Sunderland missed opportunities to give him a new contract earlier in his career when we all knew he was going to be a good player. And Josh does not come from a very wealthy background. He did what was best for him and his life, and it wasn't his fault that Sunderland were too late. And I think it's a real shame that it kind of ended with that negativity. And I wanted to pick him just because that was a really exciting time when he was leading the line, scoring goals, left foot, right foot, scoring goals with his chest at one point. What an exciting player, and someone who I do hope has a good career. And I did want to pick him with a positive slant because, like I say, I think it is a real shame that there are some negative memories of him, because I don't think it should have been that way. I think if the club had been run better at the time, then that wouldn't have happened. And I do think that's a crying shame. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh Madger was you could tell, like, at the age of 19, like, even at the age of 19, someone's hoovering outside my room. Yeah, even at the age of 19, he was scoring all of these goals, and you think, a person at the age of 19, if he's doing this now, imagine like 5 years in the future. He could be one of the world's best strikers. I don't think Harry Kane was he scoring this many goals at this quality. At the age of 19, he could push on and be a fantastic Premier League player. And then yeah, what happens really is, I mean, I don't know how it worked. Do you know how it worked? Because could we have kept him for the rest of that season and gone for free, or was the decision made he was gonna go?
Yeah. So he could have stayed for the rest of the season, and then when he moved to a new club, Sunderland would have got a small compensation fee because he was under a certain age. So realistically, he would have probably been around, I reckon, 300, 500 grand. So the club made a decision that they would sell him and get a slightly bigger fee. Listen, hindsight, they shouldn't have. The thing for me, though, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that by January, when Josh Madger had left, it was already too late, because by that point, clubs all over Europe could see that this guy was a special talent. And so Sunderland were always in a difficult position because Josh had done so well for himself that he had opportunities everywhere he looked. That should never have come to pass, because Sunderland should have offered him a contract 6 months before that when he was playing for Jack Ross in pre-season. But I would even argue a year before that. I don't know if you remember when Simon Grayson was in charge. Josh Madger had a really good pre-season campaign and then got a fairly serious injury. That would have been a great time to say, look, Josh, we're going to give you a new contract now because we believe in you. And when you come back fit, you're going to really push on. And that would have meant that Sunderland would have been in a position by the January that we're talking about to say, Josh, you stay with us for the rest of this season, get us promoted. And then if a club comes in and offers a big fee, everybody wins. And I know that at the time, there was some criticism of Josh for the decision he made, but I always think that the club should have put themselves in a stronger position. And I will never ever criticize somebody, for making a decision, for their life and their family, which is what he did. And it should never have come to that. Sunderland should have sorted that situation far before. And I think it's a real shame that we can't talk about him as the guy who scored 25 goals and got Sunderland back to the Championship, because that's what should have happened. So obviously, I completely understand why people will feel differently about him and about how it all panned out and what have you. But yeah, like I say, I haven't had too many really positive, good news stories to cover while I've been doing this job. It's obviously been, because of the reality of the situation, it's been mostly negative. But I loved watching that guy grow from being a promising under-23 player to then just becoming one of the most exciting young strikers in the country. That was exhilarating. And I want to kind of reflect on that a bit, because I don't think we do that much because of how it ended.
Yeah, of course, and we wish it ended better. And I think even if we did keep him for the rest of the season, we would have gone up easily, because there were those few games where the ball might have dropped to someone, like even Grigg, for example. You could take it back to, these are fine margins. We can take it back to Blackpool at home, his home debut. He rounds the goalkeeper, misses the open goal. If that's Josh Madger, he's probably scored that. That's a 2-1 victory. That's more. That's 2 points more. So. And you can bring it back to parts in games where you could have said, oh, well, that could have been about 6 more points we could have had there. That could have been the difference between going up and not going up. So automatic promotion and playoffs. But yeah, so yeah, it's just disappointing, really, isn't it?
It's like, even just going through this team, there were so many, isn't it? When you say, if we'd just done that, if this just happened, so many kind of missed opportunities, and yeah, it is. We'll try and stay positive, but it's hard, isn't it? Because there have been so many bad decisions and so many missed opportunities along the way. And yeah, Josh is probably, certainly in modern history, is the biggest example of that, because it's a unique skill. It's a unique skill to be able to score a goal from one chance in a game. Kevin Phillips had it. That was what made him so special. He didn't need 5-6 opportunities to score, and neither did Josh. And that's why he'll always be a footballer who can find clubs, because everyone will want that special ability. And yeah, personally, I wish him all the best.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's your team going along the bottom now. It's a fantastic team. Obviously, it took us a while to get through it all, but we've done it. We've done it. We've got there. But we come down to one last person who will be a big part of this team, not on the pitch, but off it, who will lead this team and take them forwards. The manager. Who have you gone with there?
Yeah, Roy Keane had to be my manager. I think I spoke at the start about what a special time that was. The sense that after a period where Sunderland were just kind of limping along almost, he came and brought such fantastic energy to the place. Made you feel like we had one of the most exciting clubs in the country, really. It's a shame, really, that Roy's not really gone on to have much more of a managerial career at Sunderland. And I think the perception, because of what happened to Ipswich, is that he was almost like a failed manager. That seems to be the perception you have in like the national media, what have you. And I don't think people realise how exciting the time it was at Sunderland. I don't know if you've read his autobiography, when he talks about managing Sunderland and a real affinity for the club, and you can tell he regrets the fact that it ended so swiftly. And I think if he had his time again, I think he would try and stay if he could and change things. So yeah, there was a few, there was Peter Reid, obviously, Sam Allardyce. There was a few different people who could have come into this, but I just think, that was a really exciting time for the club and the city. And so, yeah, definitely have Keane in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, he was. I mean, he was with us, 2.5 seasons, pretty much, wasn't he? I think. And yeah, that season that he resigned. We beat Newcastle 2-1 that season, and I think. Yeah, look, I mean, don't think people really noticed it, because it wasn't like we did really badly after he left. We still did quite well, and had we have got relegated, I think people would have brought it up a lot more and just said, why don't you keep Roy Keane? That was an awful decision, to not do that. But we did sort of push on the next few years and play quite good football, I think. So, I mean, yeah, we look back now, and obviously I'd love Roy Keane back now. I mean, I'd absolutely love him back now. He'd be fantastic, wouldn't he? But yeah, look, I think Roy Keane, a fantastic manager, and one that didn't he had high expectations and he expected a lot of his players. And one person we'd like, and he understood that playing for a club like Sunderland, because he'd been at Man United all those years,
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
you had to put in a shift. There was no excuse.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's those standards, isn't it? We talked about with Bodo Zenden as well. Someone who brought a elite club mentality to Sunderland. That's what he did. He brought those standards of a side that was used to winning Premier Leagues year in, year out, and he brought them to Sunderland. And he was inexperienced. It was his first managerial job, and I'm sure if there was, he had his time again, there were things he would do differently. And you're also right to point out that Sunderland had some good times after Roy left, so it wasn't like he left and the whole thing just completely imploded. Not by any stretch of the imagination, but football is about that, making you feel part of something, giving you that excitement, making you yearn for match days to come around. And I think as more than any other time, I think I had that with Roy. So yeah, for that reason alone, he has to be my pick.
Absolutely, yeah, that's fair enough. So Phil, we've pretty much reached the end now. We've gone through the team and the manager. So thank you very much for giving up your time today. How have you found it going through the team?
Yeah, it's been nice. It's obviously there's a lot of negativity from the last few years, and it's not always been a fun time for anyone associated with Sunderland, has it? So it's always nice to sort of dip back into the memories and remember some of the better times as well. Just watching this team come along the bottom, there's a couple of weaknesses, I reckon, but I reckon we'd give anybody a game. So that's a team I would like to watch, that's for sure.
Fantastic. Have you got a little message for the Sunderland fans watching before we end it?
I just can't wait to be at a ground somewhere, a small ground where you're kind of thinking, what are we doing here? And seeing 3,000-4,000 Sunderland fans just take it over, making an almighty noise, and just I cannot wait for that moment where somebody sticks one in at the back post and there's people on the pitch and there's flares going off and all that nonsense. And that's what it's all about. I miss it an awful lot, and I hope everyone's keeping okay in what I know is a really difficult time. And I just cannot wait to be in the pub with you again soon, and to be at the grounds again with you soon, because that's what it's all about. And so stay safe and well, and hopefully see you soon.
Absolutely, I can't wait for that either. That'd be incredible when we can. But yeah, no, that's a lovely way to end it. Thank you very much, Phil, for coming on. As always, the video is in association with the Sunderland Food Bank and the Sunderland Fans Museum, so go and please check those out in the description below. But yeah, thank you all very, very much for watching, and we'll see you all in the next episode.